9 degrees for Sunday, Will.
All right, thanks very much, Chelsea. 9 News at 6 is on right now.
Tonight, it's official. Peter Malinauskas sworn in as Premier before heading to the health frontline he's pledged to rebuild.
The next order of business, taking charge of the COVID calls. Will the new Premier make our lives a little easier?
Viciously beaten just trying to catch a bus, this victim of a Tea Tree Plaza attack is now demanding justice.
Dumped and starving, the chance discovery that saved this dog's life, the search for the person responsible.
And a wounded Port Adelaide star goes under the knife.
This is Adelaide's 9 News.
Good evening. South Australians are now living in a new Labor era. Peter Malinauskas sworn in as Premier today in front of family and friends.
He went on to walk the talk, a visit to medical staff at the Royal Adelaide Hospital, first order of business, as he begins implementing his ambitious list of promises.
After trying to give his dad a leg up in his new job,
that's it, lift him up. Yeah, carry him on your shoulders. Yeah.
young Jack got a lift of his own. A family affair at Government House as Peter Malinauskas was sworn in as the 47th Premier of South Australia.
I approach it with a genuine sense of humility that the people of South Australia entrusted me to lead them.
He was followed by his Deputy Premier, Susan Close, and Treasurer, Stephen Mulligan. The full cabinet will be sworn in later this week, once the count in the tight seats is finalised. And it could be a government with more women than men.
And they will change the nature of our parliament, they'll change the nature of our caucus in the Labor Party, and all for the better.
The Premier was voted in largely thanks to his message on health, and after today's ceremony, Mr Malinauskas went to the Royal Adelaide Hospital to visit medical staff. The job of implementing his policy agenda starting now, including delivering on the promise to rip up the rail privatisation contract with Keolis Downer.
As quickly as possible, but in a way that is done with the state's interests.
Earlier in the day, the outgoing Premier visited the Governor to officially resign.
All done. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I genuinely want to thank the people of South Australia.
No longer the Liberal leader either, and whether Stephen Marshall stays in the Parliament at all remains to be seen. He is still in a battle to hold his seat. That seat is the eastern suburb seat of Dunstan, and Labor is ahead. The party also believes it can win weight in the inner south, and it's in the race for Unley and Morialta. But the most likely outcome there at this stage is for the Liberals to hold on. But the Liberals have lost to an independent in Finniss on the south coast, and may even lose to another independent in Flinders in the far west. So these are remarkable changes, but there are still around 390,000 early and postal votes to count, guys.
All right, Harvey, thank you. And the Premier put the state's COVID rules at the top of his agenda, calling an immediate meeting with authorities to put them under review. Ella Duffy is live outside the meeting, and Ella, it's going much longer than anticipated.
Brenton, it certainly is. We were told that the meeting was expected to last for around an hour, and it's now almost double that. What we know in particular is that masks and close contact rules are being scrutinised by the new Premier. Now, this is the first time that Peter Malinauskas has met with Grant Stevens and Nicola Spurrier since taking office. He says he'll be fully examining the state's COVID policies and the reasons why they are in place. We'll have to wait and see exactly what decisions come out of this meeting, but the Premier believes that our state's restrictions are out of step with the rest of the country and that there's a desire within the community for national consistency. He's particularly concerned about the impact of close contact isolation rules on businesses. Let's take a listen to what he had to say on the matter earlier today.
If we are going to be different to the rest of the country, there may be a good reason for that. That serves our people well, and then I'll maintain it. But we need to understand what that reason is, and then the people of our state need to know what those reasons are. And I intend to communicate them clearly if, of course, that is the case.
Today, the state recorded 3,121 new cases of COVID-19. Fortunately, though, no deaths.
Ella, thank you. A 62-year-old man, the victim of a brutal assault at the Tea Tree Plaza interchange, wants his attacker to be behind bars for good. John Clancy suffered significant head injuries in the attack and now says he's hopeful he can put what happened behind him.
62-year-old John Clancy likes to keep to himself. But last week, when he was waiting at the Tea Tree Plaza bus interchange, he became the centre of a very public and brutal attack.
He just threw himself onto me and I just fell backwards. Keen to kick there and there. Can't remember because I was unconscious while it happened.
A 27-year-old man is accused of approaching John in broad daylight, allegedly punching him multiple times in the face and head. John left bleeding and in pain before being rushed to the Modbury Hospital, needing stitches to his head and jaw.
I mean, they do what they like when you're unconscious and can't do anything back.
A bus driver raising the alarm when he saw the accused fleeing.
Someone's been knocked out right in the middle. You better get the cops down here. The bloke's here. He's going to walk off in a minute.
But he didn't get very far. A 43-year-old woman rushing to John's aid. Police say she was pushed away by the accused.
Thank you for wherever you are. You did this, yeah. I'm very appreciative of it.
John said he was glad the woman wasn't injured during the attack, fearing it could have been worse if she hadn't stepped in.
I mean, I was unconscious, could have done anything.
The accused faces numerous assault charges and is currently behind bars, waiting to face court in May. John just hoping he can put the attack behind him.
I'm determined to get back there anyway. I'm not going to let this define me.
Kelly Hughes, 9 News.
A court secrecy order surrounds the appearance of a 15-year-old Adelaide boy facing terrorism charges. The teenager's parents ran from the youth court this afternoon after the media was barred from attending the hearing. The accused boy was arrested at South Plympton on Friday night and charged with possessing supplies for or taking steps in the manufacture of explosives. He's also charged with possessing information necessary for terrorist acts. Details of the allegations have been suppressed. The boy remains in custody and will face court again in April. RSPCA officers are tonight trying to track down the person responsible for dumping a dog left to starve in Adelaide's southern suburbs. While the motive isn't clear, they fear the rising cost of living could see more animals abandoned. In this case, the dog's life was saved only by a chance discovery.
He's just skin and bones, sick and starving, in a condition as bad as RSPCA officers have ever seen.
It's one of the worst dogs we've seen in a very long time. So the dog weighed 7.6 kilos, which is nothing. A dog like that should weigh around 20 to 25 kilos. Literally just looking at this poor skeleton of an animal that can't even stand up on its own.
The Staffordshire Bull Terrier, which is around 10 months old, was close to death when discovered by chance by a local man walking his own dogs on Thursday in a reserve at Onkaparinga Hills.
And as I got closer, I realised it was a dog. And then it saw me and its sort of eyes met mine and it started wagging its tail, and then it was definitely on its last legs.
The starving animal was otherwise unable to move, even lift its head, and was laying in the hot sun.
I knew that as soon as I saw the tail wag that there was a chance of saving it.
Mr Thompson rushed the dog to a vet who kept it alive. Then the RSPCA took over its care, carefully offering small amounts of food.
I think every meal is, he eats every meal like it's his last.
The dog is friendly, leading the RSPCA to believe it was somebody's pet before it was starved and dumped. Exactly how long the dog had been here and where or when he was initially dumped is still a mystery, with investigators hoping the public can help piece that timeline together. As well as asking for information about the case, they have this appeal to others.
I would just really hope that anyone that finds themselves in a situation that they have an animal that they can't care for, that they don't let it get that bad. I mean, this dog was, literally nearly dead.
Kate Lamb, 9 News.
Police are on the hunt for an arsonist who torched the old Wright Street Hotel in the CBD overnight, causing hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage. Nearby residents fear the heritage-listed building could now be demolished and are calling for it to be restored.
On the corner of Wright and Compton Streets, one of Adelaide's oldest buildings begins to glow. As firefighters arrive at the abandoned hotel at 1 o'clock, flames are shooting through the roof.
The Hotel Wright Street fire on the second floor. getting to work with the aerial appliance.
While crews fight the fire from above, others unsuccessfully try to access the flames from the ground. 1 hour after they arrived, it was finally brought under control. Investigators later combing through the charred skeleton, discovering the fire had been deliberately lit.
It's an awful shame. It's been a lovely building.
The pub itself was a grand old pub in its day. It was great.
Opening its doors in 1852, the hotel withstood the test of time for 170 years. Last drinks were cold 6 years ago, and it sat idle ever since. The only patrons these days staying there illegally.
It's been squatted in for a couple of years, and this is just indicative of a state that doesn't have any public housing.
The future of the building is now unclear, but nearby residents are hoping the historic structure won't be torn down to make way for future development.
A heritage building, and it should stay and should be resurrected and reconstituted. They can't knock it down just because of the fire.
It makes me feel sad and angry as well, because, you know, it just keeps happening. We keep losing these beautiful buildings.
Cam Inglis, 9 News.
An electrical fault has been blamed for a fire which ripped through a fruit shop at Woodville Gardens last night. Firefighters were called to the Hanson Road business just before 8. They managed to extinguish the flames quickly, but not before $200,000 in damage was caused. There was also smoke damage to the neighbouring pharmacy.
And a fire has broken out in a shed in Parafield Gardens overnight. Crews were called to Walnut Avenue just after 6, where they found the shed in the rear yard fully alight. It took firefighters 2 hours to extinguish the blaze. The cause is not considered suspicious.
There's been a heartwarming outcome in the case of stolen World War II memorabilia in the Barossa. Dog tags, badges and uniform insignia stolen from an Air Force engineer during a 1995 break-in have been found by police in Kapunda. Sadly, the owner of the items has since died, but police have been able to track down his granddaughter, who is currently documenting her family's history.
Well, Labor's wounds were exposed today as political power brokers gathered to farewell Kimberley Kitching in Melbourne. Her grieving husband took aim at a cantankerous cabal of colleagues accused of bullying the senator, telling mourners she deserved much better.
A political army farewelling a woman they called a warrior, and a family mourning a wife and a daughter.
These solemn proceedings today are a celebration of Kimberley's life.
Inside the Gothic Cathedral of St Patrick, friends and family searching for comfort, remembering a woman of faith and political will.
As a friend, a confidant, a lioness, a blessing. As a senator with spine.
In the church they married, Andrew Landieu honoured the life of Kimberley Kitching.
She supported me with a loyalty I felt I did not always deserve, and to which I owe everything, even my life.
And after claims she received unfair treatment from some on her own side of politics, came a message from the pulpit.
There's a lot I could say about the unpleasantness of a cantankerous cabal, not all of them in Parliament, that was aimed at Kimber.
A husband's grief, pointed and direct.
The intensity of it did baffle and hurt her. She deserves so very much better.
Those accused by friends of hurting Kimberley Kitching emotionally have denied she had been bullied and ostracised. Today, the trio of Senators Wong, Keneally and Gallagher sat separately, their leader apart from them too, all watching in silence.
I'm not going to stand here in this place and blame any one person or any one meeting.
Instead, he blames himself for not being in the car with her when she suffered a suspected fatal heart attack.
If I'm angry with anyone, I'm angry with myself. I'm angry I wasn't driving her around that busy day.
Her friends say she spent her life fighting for others and for the good of the country. Today, they lined the road for her. A long goodbye.
As a good and decent woman who saw wrong and tried to right it, thank you, Kimber, until we meet again.
Jonathan Kersley, 9 News.
Police have released security video from the scene of a sickening coward punch in the city, which left a father with serious head injuries. Officers are asking for public help to track down the suspect and 3 other people who were seen with him at the time.
North Terrace just after 1 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and an argument quickly escalates. This man is about to be knocked to the ground.
To watch the footage is just shocking, and to know what the victim's gone through is horrendous.
A single punch to the head saw the victim fall backwards onto the pavement outside the Playford Hotel. His companion, who police say was a family member, comes to his aid as one of the suspect's friends comes back for more, hurling an object in his direction. Eventually lifted from the ground, the injured man was able to walk away, but was later taken to hospital.
The victim suffered some serious head injuries that has prevented them returning to work. There's also psychological injuries that then go on into the future as well that can cause people the hesitancy to want to attend in the city or attend at crowded places.
The incident happened on the 1st of August 2020, but police are yet to make any arrests or determine what sparked the confrontation.
There's obviously a verbal conversation, but we don't know the contents of that as to why it led to an assault occurring. But the behaviour in itself, regardless of what was spoken about before, is just not acceptable.
Police have released the video as they try to identify the man responsible for the attack. They're hopeful he'll be recognised by a member of the public or perhaps even turn himself in.
If you've done it, just come forward to police, own up to your actions. It was probably something that's happened 2 years ago and you might have put out of your mind, but it still occurred, it still happened, and we still need to resolve this matter.
If you recognise the suspect or any of his companions, contact Crime Stoppers on 1800 333 000. Ben Avery, 9 News.
A Royal Flying Doctor plane has been forced to make an emergency landing at Adelaide Airport. It was just 20 minutes into its flight when it had to turn around. It had been bound for Broken Hill with 4 passengers, 3 crew and a patient on board just after 2 o'clock this afternoon. No one was injured in the landing, but the patient was taken away in an ambulance. Well, let's take a look at what's coming up later in sport with Tom Wren. Rennie, mixed news for the Power.
Kate, they're still counting the cost of that bruising loss to Brisbane. Now, Alia's had surgery, but there is better news for another Power defender. Hi, everyone. Coming up, relief for Trent McKenzie with scans ruling out a torn ACL. More good news for a trio of fellow Power players, all still in the mix for round 2. And the star debutant leaves the Crows with plenty of optimism after a heartbreaking loss.
Thank you, Rennie. See you soon. Sending a messy message to the top. Next on 9 News, protesters unleash their water-sodden anger on the Prime Minister's front doorstep. And what led to this driver ending up in a precarious position.